I had just turned 23 and was barely scraping by on my paycheck from a customer service job at a local internet provider. Willow Bend wasn't much. A quiet, slightly run-down town tucked between rolling hills and endless cornfields in central Indiana. After trade school, I'd moved in with my older brother, Matt. For nearly 4 years, we split the rent on a modest 2-bedroom apartment at the edge of town. Rent was manageable that way. Matt had the stable job, a machinist with good hours and decent pay while I was still finding my footing. Earlier this year, Matt landed a better position in Chicago. He'd been hinting at it for months, but when our lease ended in early September, he was already packed. I watched him load the last of his boxes into the trunk of his car. "Look, Danny," he said, resting one hand on the lid as it slammed shut. "I know money's tight. You sure you don't want to stay at Mom and Dad's until you figure things out?" "No," I replied, maybe too quickly. "I'm not going backwards. I'll find something. Even if it's just a room somewhere." Matt gave a short nod.
He never pushed when I put my foot down.
That was just how he was. When he pulled away, I felt the weight of reality sink in. I had 1 month left before our lease officially ran out, and I couldn't cover it alone. Not even close. I scrambled for options. I asked friends, coworkers, even dug through sketchy Facebook groups. Every lead was either too expensive, too far, or too questionable. Then, with just over a week left, I came across an ad on a site called Room Nook. Kind of like Craigslist, only supposedly safer. The listing was simple. Spare room available in quiet Willow Bend home. $400 month, utilities included. Must be tidy and respectful. Call Evan 400. That was half the price of any place I'd seen. I texted the number. "Hey, I'm interested in the room. Still available?" Minutes later, he replied, "Yes, it's open. Want to hop on a call later?" We spoke around 6 that evening. Evan's voice was calm, polite, soft-spoken. He said he was 35, lived alone, and figured the spare room shouldn't sit empty. He worked from home as a graphic designer, rarely had company, and emphasized that he liked quiet. I asked if I could see the place. He said he was out of town until the weekend, too late for me to wait. Instead, he offered photos and a video walkthrough. The house looked older but neat. White walls, carpeted floors, vintage cabinets. Not stylish, but nothing alarming. Safe even, I asked questions. He answered them all directly. Honestly, he seemed normal, boring even. And boring felt like a blessing for $400. We agreed I'd move in that Saturday. When I pulled into the gravel driveway in a rented U-Haul just before noon, the sky was gray, the street mostly empty. A kid rode a scooter 2 houses down. The house looked smaller in person. Pale yellow paint with chipped steps leading to a narrow porch. Curtains were drawn over both front windows. The garage door was open. Evan stood inside, waving. Average build, dark jeans, short brown hair with a little stubble. He looked exactly how I pictured him. "Danny, right?" he asked, extending a handshake. "Yeah. Thanks again for letting me move in on such short notice." He smiled briefly. "No problem. Want a quick tour before we unload?" "Sure." Inside matched the photos. Dated but clean, faint smell of lemon cleaner lingering in the air. My room was at the end of the hall, just past the bathroom. Small, with a twin bed frame, a closet, and a single window. The walls were bare. "You can decorate however you like," he said, gesturing casually. "Mi casa es su casa." I smiled, relieved. "Thanks. This actually works great for me." We unloaded everything in about an hour. Evan didn't talk much while helping. Just shifted boxes quietly, occasionally muttering, "Careful," or "Watch the corner." He wasn't rude, just distant by 8. After dropping off the U-Haul and catching a ride back, I was wiped out. Evan sat on the couch watching Wheel of Fortune reruns. I waved on my way to my room. "Hey, I'm turning in early. Long day." "All right," he said, eyes fixed on the TV. I unpacked just enough to set up my mattress and bedding. My desk sat in pieces in the corner. Around 9:15, I stood to lock the bedroom door and froze. There was a lock, but it wasn't on the inside. It was on the outside of the door. I just stared at it, blinking. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I opened the door and peeked down the hallway. The bathroom light glowed, but the house was silent. "Hey, Evan," I called softly, stepping toward the living room. He turned toward me, eyes a little unfocused, like I'd dragged him out of a fog. "What's up?" he asked. I hesitated, gripping the doorframe. "The lock on my door. It's on the outside." He blinked once. "Huh? Never noticed that. You think you want me to switch it around tomorrow?" "Yeah," I said. "If that's possible." "Sure," he replied. His tone was flat, casual. Didn't even realize it was like that. "I'll flip it," I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Thanks." Back in my room, I shut the door and tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. But when I lay down, my chest felt tight. Sleep came slow, heavy with unease. I woke up to faint creaking, the sound of footsteps moving across the kitchen floor, slow and deliberate, padding down the hall. My phone screen glowed, 3:17 a.m. Probably just Evan getting water, I told myself. Using the bathroom, maybe. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside my door. My heart started hammering. I stayed frozen in bed, eyes fixed on the silhouette of the door, barely visible in the weak streetlight seeping through the curtains. A soft click. I sat up instantly, adrenaline surging. I rushed to the door and tried the knob. It didn't turn. Locked. A shallow breath caught in my throat. On the other side, his footsteps retreated slowly. Then a door shut quietly. I stayed still for what felt like forever, my fingers trembling against the knob. Finally, I whispered to myself, "What the hell?" I banged once, hard enough to echo. "Evan, open the door." Silence. Then the rapid sound of footsteps, a pause. The lock clicked open after a few seconds of hesitation. I yanked the door wide, face flushed with fear. "Why did you lock me in?" Evan stood there, stunned. His mouth opened, closed, then he rubbed his palms together. "I didn't mean to, Listen, it's nothing. I get nervous. You're a stranger. I wanted to feel safe. By locking me in?" My voice cracked like a whip. He rubbed his temples, eyes flicking anywhere but mine. "I know it was dumb, okay? I wasn't thinking. I'll leave the door unlocked from now on. I promise." I stared at him, searching his face. It wasn't anger there or guilt exactly. Just a flat discomfort, like he'd been caught doing something awkward but minor. "I'm moving out in the morning," I said, my voice steady. "I'll be gone by noon." He didn't argue. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Instead, I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, stiff and alert, waiting for the U-Haul place to open. At 9 a.m., I drove the truck back to the house. The hallway was quiet. Evan's door was shut. I started moving my things with tunnel vision, hauling boxes to the truck, my mind set on one goal: get out. I was halfway done when I noticed something off. Evan's door now stood wide open. His room was empty. No bed, no clothes, no computer, not even a chair. Just dust outlines where furniture had been. I froze in the doorway. I hadn't heard him leave. No front door, no car, nothing. My gut screamed at me to move faster. I raced through the last of my boxes. Only 2 left. When I came back for the second to last, Evan was suddenly there, standing in the hallway, blocking the front door. "Move," I said firmly, gripping the box. He stared at me, expression blank. After a pause, he stepped aside. I shoved past him. The last box was just pantry food. I debated leaving it, but as I climbed into the truck, Evan appeared at the back, holding the box like a gift. "You forgot this," he said, voice calm. "Thanks," I muttered. He handed it up to me. As I turned to place it down, I felt a tug on the metal door. He was trying to shut it. I spun around, stopping it halfway. "Don't," I growled. Evan's face twitched. Then without a word, he bolted, not into the house, but off into the woods behind the property. I slammed the truck door shut and drove off without looking back. Matt let me crash at his old apartment until I found another place. I never went back to Willow Bend. I never saw Evan again. I never figured out what was behind that locked door, or what would have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. But sometimes I still wonder what kind of person installs a lock on the outside of a stranger's door, and what exactly were they planning to do with it? I didn't have much going for me right after graduation. My degree in communications sounded impressive when I said it out loud, but in the job market it barely made a ripple. Student loan payments were already clawing at my door, and my diet had devolved into cheap pizza slices and lukewarm coffee between half-hearted interviews. My buddy Caleb, who I'd known since our freshman dorm days, was in a better place. He'd landed a marketing gig right out of school, and was already bragging about test driving cars he might lease. When I mentioned I was thinking of moving out of my mom's house, he was the one who floated the idea. "You cover what you can," he said, shrugging. "I'll pick up the rest until you land something decent." I hated the thought of taking charity, but the idea of spending another year in my childhood bedroom was worse, so I said yes. We found a small 2-bedroom house for rent in a neighborhood called Sycamore Hills, about 30 minutes outside Knoxville. It wasn't new, but it had personality. Big, shadow-casting trees, sloped lawns, and narrow streets lined with actual sidewalks. The rent was more than I could afford on my own, but split between us it was doable.
Caleb signed the lease, and I Venmo'd him my half of the deposit.
The plan was simple. Stay there until I found a full-time job, then get my own place. The house itself was fine. A little creaky. Some of the floorboards bowed when you walked across them, and the water heater made a weird clicking sound when it kicked on. Still, it had charm. There was even a small sunroom off the back, which Caleb immediately claimed as his office. We moved in on a Friday. My mom helped me load up my car, and Caleb borrowed his sister's SUV. We spent the afternoon unloading boxes and nearly lost our friendship assembling a Walmart coffee table. By 7, sweaty and starving, we ordered Chinese food and sat cross-legged on the living room floor watching reruns of New Girl. That's when we saw the note. It was taped to the front door when Caleb went out to grab the food. A small square note card, the kind you'd find in a dollar store thank you set. On it, in neat but slightly awkward handwriting, was a single sentence. Welcome to the neighborhood. No name, no address, no smiley face. Just those 4 words. At first, we laughed. Creepy, I said. Yeah. Caleb smirked like he'd just stepped into a scene from Get Out. He tossed the card onto the kitchen counter, and we mostly forgot about it. The first week passed quietly. Caleb's job kept him busy during the day, and I worked nights at a locally owned pizza place. Our opposite schedules worked out. We weren't constantly under each other's feet. I spent my mornings job hunting and my evenings folding boxes and delivering mediocre pepperoni slices. Caleb, meanwhile, made PowerPoints and answered emails, occasionally reminding me that corporate life was soul-sucking but stable. The house settled, literally. It cracked and groaned at night, but I figured it was just old wood reacting to temperature changes. It wasn't until the following Wednesday that something felt off. I just pulled into the driveway a little after midnight. My shift had ended at 11, and I'd stopped by the 24-hour gas station on Pinehurst to grab a Gatorade. The house looked the same as always. Dim porch light, Caleb's car in the driveway, blinds drawn, except there was someone standing on the lawn. At first, I thought it was a shadow, maybe a mailbox, a trash can, a tree. But as I parked and stepped out of the car, I saw her clearly. A woman, just standing on the grass a few feet from our front window. She wasn't moving, just staring at the house. I cleared my throat loudly, a half-instinctual sound, part warning, part question. But she didn't move. Didn't even flinch. Hey, I called out. Can I help you? Still nothing. I took a few slow steps toward her, trying not to seem aggressive. That's when I noticed her eyes, wide, unblinking, fixed directly on Caleb's window. Ma'am? When I reached the edge of the lawn, she turned slowly and walked away. Not ran, just turned and walked toward the street, disappearing between the houses across the road. I stood there, heart pounding, debating whether or not to call Caleb. But what would I even say? Hey, some lady was staring at your room from the yard. Night-night. Sleep tight. Instead, I locked the door behind me and went straight to bed. The next morning, over cereal, I told Caleb what I'd seen. He laughed. Dude, maybe she just liked the look of our curtains. I'm serious, I said, my spoon clinking against the cereal bowl. It was weird. Did she do anything? Try to get in? No, I said. Just stared. Maybe she's homeless or something, he muttered, shrugging. We didn't talk about it much after that. He wasn't worried, so I tried not to be. I mean, she left, right? But I couldn't shake the image of her face, pale, still, expressionless. Like a mannequin someone had dressed in a hoodie and let loose on our lawn. That Friday night, something changed. I got home around 10:30. Caleb had texted me earlier saying he'd be off around 80 and was going to make some dinner. But as soon as I pulled up to the house, something felt off. The porch light was off. More importantly, the front door was wide open. I froze halfway up the walk. Caleb? I called out, no answer. I took a step closer. Why is the door open? Still nothing. I pulled out my phone and texted him, Dude, are you home? The message sent. A second later, I heard his text tone chime from somewhere inside. I slowly stepped into the house. The living room was dark. The kitchen light was off, but I could see Caleb's phone sitting on the counter, screen lit up with my message. Caleb? I tried again, louder. No response. Panic crept in fast. Caleb was the most paranoid person I knew when it came to locking doors and setting alarms. There was no way he'd leave the front door open and walk off without his phone. I climbed the stairs, each step a creaking betrayal of my presence. His bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The room looked normal, a pile of laundry on the chair, his laptop blinking on the desk. Then I heard a whisper. Is she still here? I turned sharply. Caleb's voice had come from the closet. He was crouched behind hanging coats, eyes wide. What the hell? I whispered. What's going on? I'll call 911, he hissed. Now. My fingers were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone, but I dialed. While I spoke to dispatch, we stayed locked in the closet. Caleb barely moved. He whispered that he'd gotten home a little after 8, like he'd said. He'd made a grilled cheese and gone upstairs to change. While he was upstairs, he heard the front door crash open, then footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate. His phone was charging downstairs. He froze, hid in the closet. Whoever it was didn't say a word, just walked around, then turned off all the lights. He heard them go to the back of the house, then silence. He'd waited for almost 2 hours, afraid to breathe, afraid to move, until I came home. The cops arrived 5 minutes later. As soon as they entered the house, we heard footsteps running from the back hallway toward the garage. 2 officers chased them down and tackled them before they made it out the side door. It was a woman, not the one I'd seen earlier that week. This one was older, gaunt, hair matted. She had cuts on her arms and dirt under her nails. She was furious, screaming, thrashing, wild-eyed. They had to restrain her in the cruiser. She didn't have any weapons on her. She didn't try to take anything. She had no ID, no known address. She wasn't on any medication or registry. Later that night, an officer told us she likely entered the house looking for someone. Whether it was one of us or someone who used to live there, no one knew. The thing that scared me most, though, was what Caleb said when we were giving our statements. She never said a word, never made a sound, he murmured, staring down at his hands, but I could hear her breathing through the floorboards when I was in the closet. We didn't stay in that house for long. As soon as the lease was up, Caleb moved in with his girlfriend. I ended up staying with a cousin in East Knoxville while I hunted for better jobs. I still think about that house. The note, the woman on the lawn, the one who broke in. Were they the same person? Was someone watching us from the moment we moved in? We never got answers. The police didn't follow up beyond the initial report. There were no updates, no news articles. Just a lingering fear that someone, somewhere, is still waiting in the shadows of another quiet neighborhood. Watching, listening, welcoming. In hindsight, I should have stayed in the hotel that first night. Not because of the long drive or the unfamiliar town, or even the fact that my new rental house looked like something out of a late 80s family drama. No, it was something deeper, something off. The silence clung to the place, heavy and unnatural, like a warning I didn't know how to read at the time. My name's Nina Croft. I'm 31 now, but this happened when I was 29, just before Christmas. I'd grown up in cities my whole life, Cincinnati, Columbus, then a short stint in Nashville. I thrived in noise and the constant hum of traffic and strangers. So when I landed a job offer to lead the design team at a startup called Orentech, I never imagined I'd be moving somewhere I'd never even heard of, Willow, Ohio. A speck on the map, swallowed by dead cornfields and train tracks that looked like they hadn't been used in years. The job paid better than anything I'd ever been offered. After 2 rounds of interviews, a technical test, and a Zoom call with the founders, they called me back. We'd love to bring you on. We need you here by December 1st. No hesitation. No time to overthink. I broke my lease, sold off my furniture, and started scouring the internet for rentals in Willow. The town had fewer than 7,000 people, so the options were slim. Most listings were on some old Facebook group that looked frozen in 2012. That's where I found 59 Holloway Drive. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, wood paneling, a small porch. The listing described it as cozy with quiet charm. The landlord, a woman named Tracy Meyer, gave me a video tour. She was friendly enough, the kind of Midwestern nice that made you trust her voice even if you shouldn't. I signed the year-long lease thinking, It's just for a year. I can manage anything for a year. I left Nashville before dawn. The drive dragged on longer than I'd planned. Freezing rain, construction, and my own gnawing doubts slowing me down. By the time I rolled into Willow, it was pushing 9 p.m. My GPS guided me past a sleepy downtown, shuttered diners, a hardware store with its lights off, and a library that looked like no one had stepped inside for weeks. Streetlights were rare. The one still burning cast a dim orange glow across the slick pavement, tinting everything in sepia. Like an old photograph no one wanted to remember, I hadn't seen another car in nearly 10 minutes. Turning onto Holloway Drive felt like slipping into another world. My headlights swept across a narrow street lined with nearly identical homes. Small, squat, their roofs and sidings sagging under the weight of time. Mine was second from the end. I pulled into the gravel driveway, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in the cab. The silence hit me then, thick and absolute. Not even the chirp of a cricket. Just the cold wind threading through leafless trees, moaning low like some forgotten thing. I'd only brought the essentials in my truck. 2 suitcases, an air mattress, a box of kitchen basics. Everything else would come with the movers later in the week. I carried my things to the porch, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. The hinges let out a hollow groan echoing in the emptiness. The smell was the first thing that hit me. Stale wood, faint mildew, that damp, sour scent of a place left unoccupied too long. The floor dipped unevenly, and every third step whined like someone half asleep, shifting in their bed. The layout was simple: a small living room up front, connected kitchen, and a narrow hallway leading to a bathroom and 2 bedrooms. The master faced the backyard, where a crooked fence leaned under its own weight. I moved from room to room with my phone flashlight. The power worked, but most of the bulbs glowed weak yellow, some flickering like they weren't sure if they wanted to stay alive. I added "buy new bulbs" to the growing mental checklist. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom lit the screen. "Let us know you made it safe. Love you," I typed back quickly, fingers cold. "All good, just tired. Talk tomorrow." I slipped the phone into my pocket, pretending that was the end of it. But even then, standing in the dim kitchen of 59 Holloway Drive, I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't just moving into a house. I was stepping into something else entirely. I unrolled the air mattress in the master bedroom and turned on the pump. It rattled low against the floorboards, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. I tossed a blanket and my thickest hoodie on top for warmth. The central heat hadn't kicked in yet, and the air was sharp enough to sting my nose. Sitting cross-legged on the bare floor, I rubbed my arms for warmth and let exhaustion wash over me. Then, creak. A single, deliberate sound somewhere toward the kitchen. I froze, my breath snagging in my throat. It wasn't the house settling. It was too clean, too pointed. It sounded exactly like one of the warped boards I'd stepped on minutes before. I stood slowly, my legs stiff. The hallway stretched ahead like a throat. I flipped the living room switch. The bulb buzzed but stayed dead, leaving the room in a dim wash of gray. I fumbled for my phone flashlight. Its cold glow cut across the living room. Front door locked, curtains still, nothing unusual. I swallowed, forcing my voice low. "Hello?" Silence. Maybe the house just needed to settle. It was old after all, but the hairs on my neck stayed rigid, a silent alarm my body refused to turn off. Back in the bedroom, the air mattress was fully inflated, a pale island in the dark. I zipped my hoodie up tight and buried my head under the blanket, telling myself I was being ridiculous. New town, strange house, overtired. That's all. I must have drifted off because when I woke again, it was hours later. The darkness was absolute. No streetlight glow, no moonlight through the blinds. Just black. The kind that makes you doubt your eyes are open at all. I didn't move at first. Just listened, creak, that same sound again, closer, inside the room. My stomach dropped. I sat up, holding my breath so hard my ribs ached. Slowly my eyes adjusted. Shapes emerged. The dresser, the edge of the mattress, and something else. Something tall, motionless right by the doorway. I blinked. The shape didn't move. My pulse roared in my ears. Creak. A different board now, nearer my feet. It wasn't just a shape. Someone was in the room with me. The door swung open so violently it slammed against the wall. A gust of icy air burst in from the hallway as the tall figure darted out, quick and soundless like a shadow unraveling backward. I scrambled up, phone shaking in my hands as I flicked on the flashlight. The beam caught only emptiness. The hallway stretched silent and bare, but the front door stood wide open, the curtain rippling from the night wind. I bolted outside barefoot, clutching my phone and keys, and jumped into my truck. My fingers slipped against the ignition as I tried to start it. Heart hammering so hard it felt like it was in my throat. Finally, the engine roared to life and I backed out, tires spitting gravel. I didn't stop until I reached the Willow Police Department. Inside, under harsh fluorescent lights, I spilled everything to the officer at the front desk, Deputy Callahan. He listened quietly, nodding now and then, his face unreadable. Another officer went out to the house to check. They found nothing. No intruder, no forced entry, but in the back bedroom the window lock was broken from the inside. Could be someone staying there while the house was empty, Callahan said, his voice even. Happens sometimes. I stared at him. But why come into the room while I was sleeping? He hesitated, then looked at me steadily. Some people, he said slowly, they just like watching. I called Tracy, the landlord, the next morning. Told her everything. She sounded horrified, swore she'd never had problems before, and agreed to break the lease without penalty. She admitted her brother had been using the house for storage until October, but promised he'd locked it up when he left. Found a short-term rental in town for the rest of the month, and later moved to a different neighborhood, newer, brighter, less forgotten. I stayed in Willow for the job. I'm still here. But I never go near Holloway Drive anymore, and I never sleep without a lock on my bedroom door or a motion light outside. Because even now, 2 years later, I sometimes wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I've heard it again. Creak, just one board, just one sound, and I lie there wondering if he ever really left. I never wanted to leave the house I grew up in. Even at 12, I already knew I was the kind of kid who hated change. I liked things predictable, familiar, solid, but when my mom landed a job at a small clinic near a rural community called Brookhaven, my parents decided to move. We were trading a rented duplex in suburban Arkansas for a 3-acre property in northern Mississippi, just outside the village limits. Everything about it felt off, too quiet, too empty, like the air itself had been holding its breath. The house wasn't a ruin. It wasn't even particularly spooky looking, just old, the kind of place that creaked under your feet and smelled of cedar and dust, where the floors sloped a little and time felt slower. 2 stories, white paint with green trim, and backed up to dense woods on 2 sides. No visible neighbors, just gravel roads and trees so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet in. I remember standing in the yard that first day, telling myself the tightness in my stomach was just nerves. Buster adjusted faster than I did. My 7-year-old black lab mix trotted through every room as if he were cataloging it, tail wagging, tongue lolling. He always slept in my room at the foot of the bed, sometimes snoring louder than my dad. That first day was a blur of boxes. I set up my room upstairs at the back of the house, its window staring straight into the tree line. Mom made spaghetti and we ate at the kitchen island because the table was still in pieces. That night I fell asleep with my fan humming, my Game Boy tucked under my pillow and Buster curled against my feet. The second night was when it started. It was 1:42 a.m. I remember because the old alarm clock blinked red when I sat up. Buster was growling. Not barking, growling. A low, steady vibration in his throat. "Buster?" I whispered. His tail thumped softly against the sheets, but the growl didn't stop. His ears were pitched forward, eyes locked on the corner of the room by the closet. Moonlight spilled in through the window, enough to paint the dresser, the closet door, the walls, and nothing else. I reached over and clicked on the lamp. Still nothing. The glow made the room look even emptier. Heart hammering, I slid out of bed, crossed the creaky floorboards, and yanked the closet door open. Shoes, shirts, a storage box. "Come on, dude. There's nothing there," I said out loud, trying to sound calmer than I felt. He flicked his gaze toward me, then back at the corner. His growl fell into a whimper before he lay down again, muscles still tense. He stayed alert the rest of the night. So did I. Every few minutes I'd hear him lift his head and sniff the air like something was still there. The next morning, while my dad was assembling the porch swing, I told him what had happened. Probably just heard a raccoon or something, he said, not looking up from his screwdriver. He's not used to the new sounds yet. Dogs hear everything out here. Later that afternoon, someone knocked on the door. A man stood there, maybe late 60s. Tall, lean, sunburned skin, gray, stringy hair tucked under a baseball cap, muddy boots, worn-out overalls, and a limp. He smiled when Dad opened the door. "Afternoon," he said. "Name's Marvin. I live up the road. Just figured I'd say hey to the new folks." Dad shook his hand, then called me over. "This is my son, Evan." I stepped forward, feeling awkward, and shook Marvin's hand. His grip was firmer than I expected, too firm, like he was testing me. "You're a quiet one," he said, chuckling. "That's good. Not enough quiet kids anymore." I didn't like the way he looked at me. Not mean, but too long, like he was sizing me up. He stayed on the porch a few minutes, chatting with Dad about the weather, the wildlife, the area. "We don't get many new families up this way," he said finally. "Real peaceful out here. Too peaceful sometimes." The next day, Mom and my little sister went into town for groceries. Dad was out front mowing the lawn. I sat in the backyard at the picnic table playing Pokemon Fire Red on my Game Boy Advance. The air smelled like cut grass and something damp from the woods. I didn't hear anyone approach, but suddenly Marvin was there, standing by the table as if he'd been watching me for a while. "Catching them little monsters?" he asked, his voice casual but somehow too close. He asked it so casually that I nearly dropped my Game Boy. Yeah," I mumbled. Marvin chuckled and, without asking, sat down across from me at the picnic table. Just sat there like he belonged. "That the one with the rat thing?" he said. "Pika. Something. Pikachu," I corrected automatically. He made a high-pitched squeak. His version of Pikachu, I guess. It wasn't funny. It was wrong, the kind of thing an adult shouldn't do. His voice was low and raspy, and the sound felt like it crawled under my skin. I tried to laugh politely, but it came out thin and shaky. He started asking questions about school, about my dog, about whether my dad ever left the house at night. That last one made my stomach twist. Before I could answer, the lawnmower cut off. My dad was standing just inside the yard, one hand gripping the handle, eyes locked on Marvin. He didn't smile this time. He just stared. "Hey there," Dad said, walking toward us slowly. "Just saying hey to the boy," Marvin replied, his tone light but his eyes still on me. Dad nodded, but his whole body shifted, shoulders squared, jaw tight. "Evan, go help your mom inside," he said. "She just pulled up." That was a lie. I hadn't heard a car. I pushed my Game Boy into my pocket and went inside without arguing, pretending I didn't hear Marvin murmur something low as I passed. A few minutes later, Dad came in. His face was pale but hard. "Did he just walk into the yard?" he asked. "Yeah." He didn't say anything at first. Then, "If he ever comes back around when I'm not outside, you come get me immediately. Don't talk to him. Just find me." 3 nights later, it happened again. 11 a.m. Buster shot up barking, his hackles up, a deep growl rolling out of his chest. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. He was at the window now, front paws pressed against the sill, staring out into the dark. "What is it?" I whispered, moving to stand beside him. The window was cracked open, the screen still in place. Beyond the glass, the woods were nothing but black. Then I heard it, a high-pitched squeal, soft, drawn out. Someone doing a terrible Pikachu impression, mocking. I slammed the window shut and bolted out of my room, yelling for my dad. He came out of his bedroom in boxers, gripping a baseball bat. "What happened?" "The window?" He was outside my window. He made the noise. The Pikachu one. That's all I had to say. Dad ran outside barefoot, shouting Marvin's name. Flashlight beams slicing through the trees, but there was no one. 15 minutes later, he came back in, face pale, fuming. He hadn't found a trace of him. Without a word, he marched down the dirt road toward where Marvin had said he lived. And that's where everything unraveled. The house next door wasn't Marvin's. A woman in her 70s answered the door, eyes wide with confusion. "No," she said. "I live here alone. Have for 32 years. No one named Marvin lives here." Dad went house to house that night, knocking on every visible door along the road. Nobody had ever heard of a Marvin. Nobody matching his description lived anywhere nearby. The closest actual neighbor was half a mile down the road, and he'd never seen him either. That night, Dad called the police. To my surprise, they took it seriously. A patrol car came out. An officer took my statement and asked for a description. It made the local news: unknown man posing as neighbor. Possible trespasser in rural Brookhaven. They never found him. We added new locks. Dad installed motion lights. We got a second dog. But I never felt safe in that room again. Sometimes on summer nights when the windows were open, I swear I could still hear that high-pitched Pikachu sound drifting from the woods, soft, echoing like it was waiting. Maybe it was just fear messing with me. We stayed another year before moving again. I've never played Pokemon since. I never imagined I'd end up like this. 30 years old, starting over with nothing but a duffel bag full of clothes and a beat-up U-Haul stuffed with second-hand furniture. My name's Leah Torres. 2 weeks ago, I was living in Buffalo. 5 years in a duplex, and then my landlord decided to sell. No warning, no negotiation. Just a notice that my lease was ending and I needed to be out. I was furious at first, but maybe it was the shove I needed. When I found the listing for a brand new rental in a little town called Maple Hollow, upstate New York, it felt like a chance to breathe. Quaint, quiet, only an hour from my remote counseling job. It looked like something from a catalog. Wide windows, a fenced backyard, a garage, and tucked at the end of a cul-de-sac wrapped by woods. The landlord, Mr. Finley, lived 2 towns over, managing a handful of properties remotely. He was polite over the phone, his emails prompt. The rent was fair. When I unlocked the door for the first time, the house smelled of fresh paint and new carpet. It was January. Snow clung stubbornly to the roadside and the sky hung low and gray. But that only made the inside feel cozier. For the first time in months, I thought, this could be mine, at least for now. But within the first 48 hours, I noticed him, the man across the street. His house sat at an angle from mine, a single-story place with faded siding and a front lawn of frozen dirt and brown grass. I didn't know his name. Still don't. But I remember that first glimpse. I was carrying a lamp inside when I saw him standing outside his door, arms folded, staring straight at me. I gave a polite nod, but he didn't wave, didn't smile. His eyes were cold, his face still. Weird, I told myself. Some people are just socially awkward. Retired maybe, disabled, nosy, but it kept happening. Every time I went outside, to grab groceries from the car, to check the mail, to shovel snow, he was there. Sometimes in his driveway, sometimes framed behind his front window curtain, always watching. Maybe he's just curious, Maria, my best friend from college, said over the phone that Friday. Small towns are like that. You're new. You're the mystery. I laughed, trying to brush it off.
Yeah, but I've seen him at like midnight.
Just standing in his driveway. No coat, just standing. Maria paused. Okay, that's weirder. I left it there. I didn't want to spiral. The weekend passed. I buried myself in work. All my grief counseling sessions were on Zoom, which meant I spent entire days at home inside my own head. But I couldn't stop noticing him. Morning, night, no matter the time, if I looked long enough out the front window, he was there. Sometimes I'd turn off the lights and peek through the blinds, hoping to catch him off guard. But he was always already looking. I began to realize other things. No mail ever came to his house. No lights switched on inside. No visitors, no packages. Just the man. On Tuesday night, I was microwaving dinner when a scraping sound made me freeze. It was coming from outside, something heavy dragging across pavement. I stepped into the living room and carefully pulled the blinds aside. He was hauling a ladder across his lawn. It was nearly 11:30 p.m. My first thought was that he might be fixing something, but it made no sense. He walked it to the side of his house and disappeared into the dark. I stood there, heart knocking against my ribs, waiting for some kind of punchline. None came, just silence. The next morning, I made the mistake of opening my curtains. He was standing at the edge of my driveway, less than 20 feet away, staring directly into my window. His eyes didn't flicker. Not when I opened the curtain. Not when I stepped back. A wave of nausea twisted through me. I snapped the curtain shut, palms sweaty, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. With trembling fingers, I called Maria again. He was just standing there, I whispered. Right outside my house. Call the police, Maria said immediately. For standing? What can I even say? You say you're a woman living alone and a guy keeps watching you. And now he's on your driveway. That's enough to at least document it. I didn't call. Not yet. That night I locked everything. Deadbolts, windows, even wedged a chair under the back door handle. But I still couldn't sleep. Around 2:15 a.m. I heard footsteps in the backyard. Slow, deliberate crunching the thin crust of snow. I froze in bed, every muscle locked, my breath shallow. The steps stopped. The silence stretched. 5 minutes. 10. My pulse roared in my ears. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I crept to the back window, every nerve in my body straining, and eased the curtain aside just enough to see. He was there, at the far edge of my yard, half hidden by darkness, standing perfectly still and facing me. His shape was so motionless it almost looked like a cutout. My stomach turned to ice. I stumbled backward and fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I dialed 911. My voice came out cracked and small as I whispered what was happening. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. Blue and red lights flickered faintly across my living room walls. They walked the perimeter, spoke to me in low voices, polite but distant. By then, the man was gone. I told them everything. The neighbor, the ladder, the constant watching, the footsteps in the snow. One of the officers tilted his head, trying to sound reassuring. "Technically, your backyard is fenced," he said. "If he were inside, that would be trespassing." But we didn't see any footprints in the snow. I wanted to scream. The snow had melted into a frozen, patchy crust during the day. Of course there wouldn't be footprints. My mouth felt dry, my pulse hot in my temples. The next morning I emailed Mr. Finley asking if there were any cameras on the property. He didn't have any, but offered to have someone come out and install some for a fee. I declined. It felt like one more cost I couldn't shoulder. By the second week, my life had narrowed to the inside of the house. I barely left except for essentials. Even stepping into the garage made me feel like eyes were on me. I started keeping a pocket knife in my hoodie pocket. Every night I double-checked the locks, then triple-checked. I bought blackout curtains, but none of it stopped the crawling sensation of being watched. It was like living next to a shadow that never blinked. Then came the worst. Night Thursday, I'd had a long video call for work that ran past 11. I skipped dinner and went straight to bed, heavy with exhaustion. Somewhere in the middle of the night, a deep hollow thud slammed against the side of the house. I bolted upright, heart hammering. Then it came again, right outside my bedroom wall on the second floor. My brain scrambled for a reason, but nothing made sense. Moving slowly, barely breathing, I inched toward the window. My fingers trembled as I pushed the curtain aside an inch and screamed. His face was right there, inches from mine, staring through the glass. He was standing on a ladder, the same ladder I'd seen him drag across his lawn that night. His eyes didn't flinch when I screamed. They didn't even flicker. He just looked at me, steady and blank, like my terror was nothing. I stumbled backward, tripping over the corner of my bed, scrambling for my phone. By the time I called 911, I could already hear the ladder shifting, metal scraping against the siding as he tried to take it down before they arrived. This time, they caught him, right outside his house, dragging the ladder back. He refused to say why he had it, claimed he was cleaning something. They charged him with trespassing, but nothing serious. He was released the next morning. That afternoon, a knock at my door startled me. A woman in her late 40s stood on my porch, wrapped in a cardigan. Her face was pale, tired. "You're Leah?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I live down the street. I saw the cops here last night." She hesitated. Was it the man across the street? I nodded again, slow. She sighed and looked away. "He's done stuff like that before, to us. To another family that used to live next door. Always watching. Once I caught him trying our back gate, but when we told the police..." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Same thing. They can't do anything without proof." My jaw clenched. "Why didn't anyone warn me?" She looked down at her shoes. "I don't know. Maybe we should have." I broke the lease within the week, packed everything and found a new apartment in a busier area, paid 2 months' rent just to get out. When I told Mr. Finley, he didn't even sound surprised. "You're not the first one to break the lease in that house," he said quietly. "Everyone who rents there only stays a few months." I never could figure out why. I didn't answer. Now, sometimes when I'm walking home late or pulling my curtains shut for the night, I feel that old familiar sensation creeping up my spine that someone is watching me. I tell myself it's just trauma, a reflex I haven't shaken. But deep down, I'm not so sure, because I still have that photo on my phone. The one the police never asked for, his face right outside my second-story window, smiling. In the quiet stretch of Ironwood Lane, nothing was supposed to go wrong. This was supposed to be my new beginning. After years of renting cramped apartments in the busier parts of Greenwood Hills, I'd finally taken the plunge and bought a home, a small, single-story house with faded blue siding at the very end of a barely paved road. It sat on 2 acres, just far enough from the city that the air felt softer in my lungs, but close enough that if traffic behaved, I could be at work in under 30 minutes. The move had been as much emotional as it was practical. My mom had died the year before. After the funeral, the paperwork, and the long, lonely process of sorting through her things, I realized there was nothing tethering me to my overpriced downtown rental. With my savings and a portion of the inheritance, I bought this place. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Peaceful. Private. Or at least that's what I believed. The first few days were blissfully quiet. I unpacked slowly, letting the silence stretch over me. In the mornings, I stood barefoot on the back porch with a mug of coffee, just watching the tree line shift in the breeze. The calm was a kind of therapy I hadn't realized I'd been craving. Cell service barely worked out here, and nobody dropped by unannounced like they did in the city. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable. It was my 3rd night when I heard the knock. I had just finished a frozen pizza and poured myself a glass of wine. The television murmured in the background, some mindless show filling the quiet when the sound came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not loud, not frantic. A sound meant to be noticed, not ignored. I muted the TV and moved to the side window. Outside was already swallowed by darkness. My porch light flickered weakly, barely illuminating the figure standing there. An older man, maybe late 50s. Long gray hair pulled back into a low ponytail. His skin looked weathered, creased from years of sun and wind. His clothes were tattered, a plaid shirt hanging loose on his frame, jeans stiff with dirt. But it was his eyes that caught me, sunken and shadowed even under the weak glow of the bulb. I unlatched the door but left the screen closed. "Evening," he said. His voice was raspy but calm. Hi," I replied, fingers still curled on the edge of the doorframe. "Can I help you?" "Just wanted to say welcome to the neighborhood," he said. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. "Name's George. I live up the road." "Oh, well, thanks. I'm Issa, just moved in a few days ago." He nodded slowly. "Saw the truck. Thought I'd say hi." His tone was flat. No warmth, no curiosity. He didn't ask to come in, didn't comment on the house. Just stood there, still as a post, staring at me with a kind of intentness that made my stomach tighten. It felt like he was memorizing my face. "Well, thank you for stopping by," I said softly, inching the door more closed. "Nice to meet you." He didn't move right away, just stared a second longer as if there was something else he wanted to say but couldn't bring himself to. Then finally a single nod. Without another word, he turned and walked off into the dark. I closed the door and double-locked it, something I hadn't done since moving in. The next day I had off work. I spent the afternoon hanging shelves and unboxing kitchen supplies, music playing loud enough to drown out the emptiness of the house. I wasn't paying attention to the time until it came again. 3 slow, heavy knocks. I muted the speaker and went to the door. It was George. Same clothes, same blank expression. "Hi again," I said, my voice tighter this time. "Everything going okay?" he asked. "Yes, just unpacking mostly." He stood still, eyes flicking past me into the house. I shifted to block his view, heart thudding. "You need anything?" he asked after a moment. "Nope, I'm all good." A long pause. "You sure?" "Yes," I said, firmer now. "But thank you." Another pause. That same unblinking eye contact. I closed the door without saying goodbye. By 9:30 that night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it again. Only this time it wasn't a knock. It was pounding, aggressive, demanding. I froze, toothbrush still in hand. My heart kicked into high gear. I flicked off the bathroom light and crept toward the front door, every board under my feet sounding suddenly too loud. The porch light was still burning, casting a weak yellow glow across the front step. but the curtain blurred my view into a grainy silhouette. A shadow loomed just beyond the glass, larger this time, closer than before. I held my breath. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was somebody else, but a knot deep in my stomach told me it was George. 10 seconds dragged by like minutes before the knocking started again. Same slow rhythm, same heavy force. "Please leave," I finally shouted through the door, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound steady. "I'm busy and not interested in company." Silence. He didn't walk away. He just stood there. My hand hovered over the doorknob, unsure whether to open it or grab my phone and call the police. That's when I saw it, a faint metallic glint in the corner of my eye. Through the curtain, dimly lit by the porch light, I caught the dull flash of a blade edge peeking from under his sleeve. My breath caught. My hand shot to the deadbolt, slamming it shut with a sharp click. "Go away!" I yelled louder this time. He didn't speak, didn't protest. He just stayed there, silent for what felt like an eternity, maybe 30 seconds before I finally heard footsteps retreating. I called the non-emergency number with my hands still shaking. My voice came out uneven as I told the dispatcher about a suspicious man with a knife who'd shown up twice and was now pounding on my door. They promised to send someone. By the time a sheriff's deputy arrived 40 minutes later, George, or whoever he was long gone. The deputy walked the property with a flashlight, asked me questions, and jotted down my statement. He promised they'd patrol more often, but when I gave a detailed description, he frowned. "There's no George who lives out here, far as I know," he said. "Closest neighbor is 2 houses up, a retired woman. Nobody matching that description lives nearby." I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every passing car's headlights threw ghosts across my walls. I left every light on until dawn, feeling like I'd aged 5 years in a single night. In the morning, I walked over to the house 2 doors up and knocked. Ellen answered, a kind-faced, white-haired former schoolteacher who reminded me of my grandmother. "No, honey," she said when I asked about George. "There's no one like that here. We don't get new folks often." I would know. I told her what had happened. She clucked her tongue and gave me a look of genuine concern. "You be careful," she said softly. "There's people who wander in from the highway sometimes. This area ain't what it used to be." That morning I bought a set of cheap security cameras and mounted them around the house. I could watch everything from my phone now. That night there was no knock. But at 1:17 a.m. my phone buzzed. Motion detected, front porch. I opened the live feed. There he was, George, standing just outside the edge of the camera's range, watching the house still, silent, waiting. He stayed for 3 full minutes, then vanished into the tree line like a shadow melting into darkness. I didn't sleep a wink. Ellen stayed with me for a few hours the next evening while I spoke with police again. They still had no leads. I even showed them the footage. "He hasn't trespassed yet," one officer said, though his tone held an edge of unease. "But if he steps onto your porch again or tries to enter, call 911 immediately. Don't hesitate." That night I went to bed early with every light on. The house felt like a stage lit for an audience I couldn't see. At 3:42 a.m., the sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. Not from the front, from the kitchen window. My body moved before my mind caught up. I bolted from the bed, snatched my phone, and ran into the bedroom closet, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. He was inside. I could hear his footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the kitchen floor. The groan of a door hinge opening, something scraping along the wall. Maybe the knife. I whispered to 911, trying not to sob as I gave them my address. His breathing was audible now, steady and unhurried, like he wanted me to hear. The dispatcher's voice was calm but distant in my ear. "Units are en route. Stay where you are." It felt like forever. He was moving room to room, deliberate, patient, like he was toying with me. Then finally, the front door crashed open. Voices shouting, "Police." Moments later, the all clear. They found him in the hallway, the knife still in his hand. He had no ID. No license plate on the rusted-out van parked half a mile from my house. No known address, no record. Just a man who had somehow fixated on me. He never said why. He didn't speak at all. He was arrested. The officers said he might have been squatting in the woods nearby, Possibly off medication, possibly something worse. They couldn't prove intent to kill, but the attempted burglary, weapons charges, and trespassing stuck. I still live on Ironwood Lane, but now my windows are reinforced. I have a big dog. The cameras are upgraded. I took self-defense training. And I don't answer knocks at night anymore. Because even in the quietest places, especially where the trees hide you from the world, someone might still be watching. In the beginning, I honestly wasn't sure I could even afford a house. My name's Claire Jensen. I was 29 when I moved into my first home, completely alone. I'd just been promoted at a small financial firm in Oregon, which meant my paycheck finally reached the level where buying was possible. Barely, but possible. No family nearby, and most of my friends had either moved out of state or were swallowed by their own families. I told myself I didn't mind. I wasn't scared of being alone. If anything, I was craving the quiet. The house itself was a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch style in a quiet pocket just outside Pendleton, the kind of neighborhood where snow blankets everything in winter and your neighbors wave from across the street but don't knock unless there's a real reason. The backyard stretched farther than I expected for my budget, and the previous owners had left behind a weathered wooden swing set, still faintly charming despite the peeling paint. The closing dragged on longer than expected. I didn't get the keys until mid-December. By then, snow had already settled in thick layers across sidewalks, rooftops, and empty yards. It was cold, cloudy, and completely silent when I pulled into the driveway that morning. There was no one to help me move. After the down payment and all the upfront costs, movers were out of the question. I'd packed my little SUV full of boxes, borrowed a friend's old truck for the furniture, and woken up before sunrise to beat the storm forecasted later that night. By the time I shoveled the driveway and started hauling things inside, my gloves were already soaked through. More than once I slipped on hidden ice patches, swearing under my breath even though no one could hear me. It was around 5 in the evening when I dragged in the last piece, a sagging bookshelf that barely fit through the front door. My muscles ached. My stomach was hollow. There was no takeout nearby, and I hadn't unpacked dishes yet, so I dug a leftover burrito out of the cooler and microwaved it, eating it standing up in the kitchen. I had electricity, running water, and Wi-Fi, but the bed wasn't built and all my clothes were still in boxes. I pulled the couch cushions into the living room, grabbed a blanket from my trunk, and decided to sleep there for the night. Around 11:30 p.m., just as I was drifting off, I heard it, the crunch, unmistakable. Someone walking across snow. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Not an animal. Not the wind. I froze, clutching the blanket tighter. My heart thudded in my ears. The sound stopped just before the porch. I didn't have curtains on the living room windows yet. I didn't move, terrified that if I stood up, whoever it was might see me. I waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. Eventually I whispered to myself, "You're just exhausted," and tried to believe it. Somehow I fell asleep. I woke to bright sunlight filtering through the windows and a splitting headache from the cold. As I sat up and rubbed my eyes, something felt wrong. My gaze went to the front door. It was unlocked. Wide-eyed, I stumbled over and checked again. Yes, the door was shut, but the deadbolt wasn't turned. I knew I'd locked it the night before. I'd even double-checked it after hauling in that last bookshelf. Slowly, I opened the door and stepped outside. No footprints. Nothing around the porch except the tracks I'd made yesterday, now softened by a thin layer of fresh snow. Maybe it had snowed again overnight and wiped everything away, or maybe I'd imagined the sound. That's what I told myself anyway. The next few days were filled with unpacking and small adjustments. I met a neighbor, Marlene, across the street, a retired teacher in her mid-60s, sweet and chatty. She dropped off banana bread on the second day and warned me about the slick corners in the street. By the third night, I was finally sleeping in my actual bed. Everything seemed normal again, until that Friday. I'd spent most of Saturday building IKEA furniture, my living room scattered with cardboard, little plastic bags of screws, and a half-finished coffee. Around 6 that evening, my stomach growled. I decided to grab something quick from the drive-thru about 15 minutes away. I was gone maybe 40 minutes tops. When I pulled back into the driveway, the first thing I saw made my stomach drop. Footprints. Clear, deep ones in the snow. They led from the sidewalk straight to my front porch. They weren't old, the edges were sharp, untouched, no melting. It hadn't snowed since morning. I set the car in park, scanning the neighborhood. The street was still. The kind of winter stillness where even the air feels heavy, not a soul outside. I climbed out slowly, following the prints up to my porch. They stopped at my door. My pulse thudded against my throat. I reached for the doorknob and turned it. Unlocked. Again. A hot nausea twisted in my gut. I remembered locking it. I knew I had. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, calling out a soft, shaky hello. No answer. Room by room I searched, bedroom, kitchen, laundry, closets. Every window shut. Every door locked. Nothing missing. No sign of a break-in. But the air in the house felt different, like it had been disturbed. I barely slept that night, lying in bed with my ears straining for the slightest sound. By Saturday morning, I'd had enough. I drove to the hardware store and bought a new deadbolt. Had it installed before noon. I picked up a cheap indoor camera, too. Pointed it straight at the entryway. That night, I lay in bed scrolling Zillow for houses with fences, second-floor bedrooms. Anywhere but here. My new place didn't feel like mine anymore. Sunday evening, after a long bath meant to calm my nerves, I was brushing my hair when I heard it. A soft creak, the kind of sound floorboards make near the front door. I turned off the bathroom fan and held my breath. Another creak. I stepped quietly into the hallway, heart hammering, and edged toward the top of the stairs. From there, I could see the entryway below. A man stood just inside the door, motionless. He wore a dark jacket, jeans soaked up to the knees, snow dripping from his boots. The front door was wide open behind him, spilling in the night air. I gasped louder than I meant to. His head turned slightly, just slightly, toward the stairs. I bolted back into the bathroom and slammed the lock, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped my phone. I could hear him moving now, slow, deliberate steps across the floor, like he was exploring. I dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was steady, telling me to breathe, asking my address, asking if I could still hear him. Yes, I whispered, nodding as if she could see me. Then suddenly, the sound of the door slamming. Nothing else. No steps, no creaks, just silence. When the police arrived, the house was empty. They told me the footprints led up to my house and then away again, down the sidewalk toward the trees at the end of the street. They didn't recognize the man from my camera footage either. It had only caught his back as he entered, a blurry outline. I changed the locks again, upgraded the security system, installed motion detecting lights outside. Nothing else ever happened. No more footprints, no more unlocked doors, no more sounds in the night. And yet I couldn't relax. I couldn't sleep unless every door had been double-checked. 3 times at first, now 4. I started keeping a baseball bat by the bed. I jumped at the furnace kicking on, flinched when the wind moved the trees. I thought about selling the house, but I couldn't afford to break the mortgage just months after moving in. So I stayed. And I waited to see that jacket again. Waited to hear footsteps on the porch. Waited for the doorknob to turn at 3 a.m., but he never came back. And somehow that's worse, because now I live with a question that never leaves me. What was he going to do? And why did he stop? I'll probably never know, but I still check the door every night. 4 times now, just in case. I never thought I'd be afraid of living alone. I used to crave solitude, the peace, the quiet, the freedom to wander around in my pajamas at 2 a.m. eating cereal without anyone judging me. Independence was something I had dreamed about for years, and when I bought my first home in Gresham Pines, Oregon 2 years ago, it felt like I had finally crossed a finish line. After years of grinding through 60-hour work weeks, juggling freelance graphic design projects on top of my modest agency job, I'd saved every spare dollar until I could sign the papers. It was just a little 2-story craftsman on a quiet street, lined with moss-covered sidewalks and thick pine trees swaying behind my backyard fence. It wasn't huge, but every inch of it was mine. At the time I was single, still am actually. And while people always raised an eyebrow at a woman living alone in a house, I felt ready. The day I moved in, it rained the way it always seemed to in Oregon. Misty, gentle, soaking everything in a soft gray haze. My friends Marcus and Jules came to help with the U-Haul. They refused to let me pay them, so I ordered a spread of Thai food instead. We sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes, eating pad see ew and joking about which one of us would find a cursed antique or secret passage first. "I swear to God," Marcus said through a mouthful of noodles, "if you find an old rocking chair in the attic, I'm burning this place down." Jules snorted. "It's always the attics, man. That or the crawl space. You ever see The Taking of Deborah Logan?" "Don't," I warned, pointing at her with my chopsticks. "This is my first night in the house. Don't put horror movie ideas in my head." They stayed until close to 10, helping me arrange furniture and laughing about my future haunted house. When Marcus went to the bathroom, he came back frowning. "Hey, Izzy, you got plumbing in the walls or something?" I blinked at him. "I mean, yeah, that's generally where plumbing goes." "No, like," I heard knocking, not pipes clanking, more like something inside the wall next to the sink. Jules perked up, clearly intrigued. "Rats?" Marcus shook his head. "Too slow, too steady. Could be a plumbing issue, I don't know." I made a mental note. "I'll call someone next week, get it checked." They left not long after. I walked them out, hugged them both, then stood alone in the driveway a moment, breathing in the damp night air. My house, my life. Finally. I stayed up late. Unpacking didn't feel urgent, so I curled up on my bed upstairs, surrounded by half-opened boxes and a rolled-up rug. My laptop sat on a pillow, streaming a BoJack Horseman rewatch for comfort. That's when I heard it. A dull, rhythmic thump. Faint, but steady. I paused the episode and sat up, holding my breath. The sound was coming from above. The house had an attic accessible by one of those pull-down ladders in the hallway ceiling, but above my bedroom there should have been nothing but insulation and beams. I stood listening. The thumping stopped. Probably a raccoon, I told myself. Maybe a bird. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and opened the attic door. The wooden ladder creaked as I pulled it down. I hesitated, my heart hammering, every instinct screaming to leave it alone. "Don't be ridiculous," I whispered to myself, and climbed. The attic light was a weak, flickering bulb dangling from a wire. I pulled the string, and a dusty amber glow barely lit the space. It smelled of mothballs and stale air. Nothing. Just exposed beams, insulation, and a couple of large, old-looking paintings leaning against the far wall, probably left by the previous owner, though they hadn't mentioned them. I stood still, straining to hear. Silence, shaking off the nerves. I climbed down, closed the attic, and went back to bed. I told myself it had to be the house settling. 3 nights later, the noises returned, always at night, always above my bedroom. Not constant, but often enough that I started to dread the silence. I called a pest control service the next morning. They found no droppings, no nests, no chew marks. "Looks clean," the guy told me. "Might just be the wind and old wood. Happens a lot in these older homes." But it wasn't the wind. I knew what footsteps sounded like. I knew what dragging sounded like. By the 4th night, I decided to investigate again. I climbed into the attic, the wooden steps groaning under my weight, and made my way to the far wall where the 2 paintings leaned. They were both thickly framed oils of forest landscapes, dark, misty woods rendered in muted greens and browns. Something about them unsettled me. Maybe it was the way the shadows pooled between the trees or how the brushstrokes seemed almost frantic. One of the paintings was tilted, not quite flush with the wall. Curiosity tightened my chest. I reached out and moved it aside. Behind it wasn't a vent or a hatch, but a square opening about 3 feet wide, cut neatly into the wall. My heart skipped. The opening led into a part of the attic that shouldn't exist. Not in any of the house's floor plans I'd pored over before buying it. I ducked my head into the gap, the beam from my phone flashlight shaking in my hand, and froze. It was a room, a small hidden space maybe 8 feet long, 6 feet wide. The air was thick, damp, sour. A pile of blankets lay in the corner next to empty fast food wrappers. An old Hello Kitty pillow, gray and stained with age, slumped against the insulation. The smell hit me, sharp ammonia mixed with something rotten. In the corner, a cracked mirror leaned against the wall beside a broken flip phone. My stomach lurched. I backed out fast, adrenaline flooding my veins, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. I was so focused on the hole that I didn't notice the faint whisper of movement behind me. Then I turned. She was there. A woman, or maybe a girl. Filthy skin stretched tight over her bones like wax paper. Her eyes were wide, rimmed red, and her hair hung in greasy clumps around her face. She was trembling. Her lips cracked and bloodied. "Didn't mean to," she whispered, stepping toward me. Her voice was thin, shredded, almost a whimper. I gasped, raising my phone like a shield. "Stop! Who are you?" She lunged. Her nails raked across my arms, sharp and fast. I screamed and shoved her with everything I had. She stumbled backward, shrieking, limbs flailing like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Heart pounding. I scrambled down the ladder 2 steps at a time and slammed the attic door shut, yanking the pull string up so she couldn't follow. Then I bolted to my room, locked the door, and called 911, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely hit the buttons. "There's someone in my attic," I told the dispatcher twice. "A woman. She attacked me. She's sick. She's not right." Officer Delaney was the first to arrive, followed by 2 backup units. Within 5 minutes, my quiet street was awash in red and blue lights. I stood in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, shaking, as 4 officers went up the attic ladder with flashlights and weapons drawn. For a moment, there was silence. Then a scream, high and inhuman, ripped through the house. A loud crash followed, muffled shouts and the telltale pop of a taser. Eventually, the officers came back down, dragging her between them. She was screaming, convulsing, spit flying from her mouth. At one point, she twisted and bit an officer hard enough to draw blood before they wrestled her into a cruiser. "She's been living up there," one of the officers told me, his face pale. "Looks like for weeks, maybe months." Her name was Marina Quinn, 32, a history of substance abuse and untreated mental illness. She'd gone missing from Portland nearly 8 months ago. Her family thought she was dead. She'd apparently been squatting in foreclosed homes across the state. The realtor who sold me the house had never checked the attic after the previous owners left. I couldn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, those eyes, that voice. I hired a contractor to seal off the false wall and install a motion sensor in the attic. I started therapy too. PTSD doesn't care how strong you think you are. The hidden room above my bedroom is gone now, boarded up permanently. And yet, sometimes late at night, lying awake in the dark, I still think I hear scratching up there. But I never go back, and I never leave a room in my house unchecked again. I never imagined that buying a house could end up being the most terrifying decision of my life. At first, it felt like a blessing. I was 28, working steady hours at a digital design firm in Evansville, Indiana. Not wealthy, not struggling, just comfortably afloat. My dad had always drilled it into me not to expect handouts, but he'd built himself a decent life and promised long ago that when I was ready for my first house, he'd help. When I called to tell him I was serious, he wired $40,000 into my account within 2 days. "It's a loan, Jenna," he told me over the phone, though his tone carried that familiar chuckle. "But if you settle into a good place, maybe I'll forget to collect." I toured a few options before settling on a quiet 2-bedroom on Heather Lane. Fair price, peaceful neighborhood, and the seller, a weary older man named Charles, looked almost relieved to let it go. His parents had lived there since the 60s. His dad had passed back in 2007, and his mom had only just died 3 weeks before. The house carried that kind of old-fashioned charm, slightly outdated but solid. Charles even offered to leave most of the furniture. "It's old but sturdy," he said, patting the mahogany coffee table like it was a loyal dog. "Take what you want, toss the rest." I agreed. Less shopping meant more saving. Day 1. Moving day. My best friends Carla and Evan helped me unload the U-Haul. Afterward, we lingered, ate pizza on the floor, and explored every creak and corner. "Creepy but cute," Carla announced, peeking into the dim basement. "Like one of those grandma houses in horror movies." "Don't listen to her," Evan said, grinning. "This place is cozy. Just add Wi-Fi and a couple of candles and you're set." We all laughed, and I felt good, safe even. The living room came with an old but elegant sofa set, a scarred piano, and a heavy coffee table. The only piece I couldn't stomach was the rocking chair by the window. Its faded floral upholstery reminded me of funeral parlors. The headrest was worn down to a shiny patch where someone's head must have rested for years. "Definitely getting rid of that," I said, tapping its armrest like it might tap back. That night, after my friends left, I wrestled the chair out to the curb alone. Trash pickup wasn't until Friday, but I didn't care. I didn't want that thing inside another second. Day 2. Sleep barely came. Insomnia has always stalked me in bursts. Sometimes I'm fine. Other nights I hum with restless energy like a refrigerator. By morning I was running on fumes but managed to unpack most of the essentials upstairs. There was more stuff than I remembered. Closets stuffed with moth-eaten blankets, bins of holiday decorations, brittle old books with cracked leather bindings. I sorted through it all slowly, tossing what I didn't want into thick black contractor bags. By evening I was done in. Too tired to cook, I grabbed my keys and drove to the little Chinese place off Glendale. When I got back around 7, I froze on the porch. The front door was unlocked. I just stood there, key in hand, trying to remember. Did I forget to lock it earlier? I always locked the door, especially now that I lived alone. My stomach sank the way it does when you think there's another stair and your foot hits nothing but air. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe I'd slipped up. I stepped inside cautiously, set the takeout on the counter, and flicked on every light. Living room, kitchen, hallway, then upstairs too. Everything looked undisturbed. Still, I couldn't shake the dread until I checked the basement. The basement door creaked as I pulled it open, the narrow wooden stairs dropping into shadow. I hadn't been down there since the inspection. It was all gray concrete, washer and dryer, water heater, bare shelves. I flicked the switch. The bulb sputtered and buzzed, then lit weakly. Halfway down the steps, I stopped. Right in the center of the basement sat the rocking chair. The same one. Faded floral fabric, worn patch on the headrest, exactly as it had been before I dragged it outside. I stood there gripping the banister, staring at it for a full minute, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. I knew I'd dragged that chair to the curb the night before. I'd felt the weight of it digging into my palms, heard its wooden legs scrape across the driveway. The memory was so clear it made my skin prickle. I backed away from the basement steps, shut the door quietly, and pressed my back against it. I didn't eat dinner. Instead, I sat in the living room with every lamp and overhead light burning, the glow bleaching the shadows out of every corner. Parks and Recreation played on the TV, the volume turned up too high, just enough to cover the ringing in my ears. Day 3. I woke up on the couch at 3:12 a.m., stiff-necked and disoriented. The house was dead quiet. Then I heard it creak, creak, like an old floorboard shifting under weight, rhythmic, back and forth. My heart stopped. It was coming from the basement. I crept toward the basement door, bare feet on cool wood. When I flicked the switch, nothing happened. The bulb stayed dark. My stomach dropped. I darted into the kitchen and yanked the flashlight from under the sink, fingers trembling. Back at the door, I hesitated before opening it, the hinges groaning like a warning. I aimed the beam down the stairs. The rocking chair was moving, and there was someone sitting in it. She was an old woman, hunched, curly gray hair spilling over her shoulders, glasses glinting in the flashlight's beam. She wore a pink nightgown so pale it almost glowed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Slowly, so slowly, her head began to turn upward until her face aligned with mine. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered against the steps, its beam spinning crazily. I bolted upstairs and slammed the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. I called 911, babbling something about an intruder, an elderly woman, the rocking chair I'd thrown out. 2 officers arrived within 15 minutes. We searched the entire house together, even the basement. The chair was still there, but empty. No footprints, no handprints. Dust on the washer undisturbed. No extra doors, no broken locks, nothing. The taller officer's expression softened into a kind of cautious pity. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "are you under any medication? Or unusual stress?" I nodded, my voice small. "Yes, but I'm telling you, I saw her." They wrote a brief report, handed me a copy, and left. No reassurances, no advice, just the sound of their boots retreating down my walkway. I didn't sleep after that. Every creak of the floor sent my heart racing. By evening, desperation outweighed my embarrassment. I dug through the paperwork and found Charles's number. He answered on the second ring. "Hello?" Hi, Charles? It's Jenna, the one who bought your mom's house. Oh, hi. Everything okay? I hesitated, twisting the phone cord around my finger. I don't want to freak you out, but I saw someone in the basement tonight. An older woman, curly gray hair, pink nightgown, glasses. She was sitting in that rocking chair, the one I threw out. Silence. I could hear his breathing, then a faint sniffle. That was her favorite chair, he said finally, voice cracking. And that gown, that's the one we buried her in. I kept that chair in the basement for years. She used to sit there and listen to my dad play piano. I don't understand, I whispered. She loved that house, he said softly. Loved it so much she refused to leave even when her mind started to go. She talked to people who weren't there. Said they were visitors, friendly ones. Do you think she's... He didn't answer. But 20 minutes later, he showed up at my door, pale and trembling. We went down to the basement together. He stood there for a long time, staring at the chair. His hands shook. I'm taking this, he said finally, voice low. It never should have been left here. I didn't argue. After that, I kept the basement door locked. For weeks, I did my laundry at Carla's place instead. I never saw the woman again. No rocking chair, no movements, but small things started happening. The piano in the living room would release a single note in the middle of the night, always the same low G. The hallway sometimes smelled faintly of lavender, even though I didn't own anything scented. And every now and then I'd find the basement light bulb turned just slightly askew, as if someone had tried to unscrew it but lost interest. Still, I lived there for a year and a half. Slowly the terror dulled into a low, constant unease. The house stayed quiet, peaceful even, but it never felt entirely mine. Now I live in a condo in the city. No basement, no creaky floorboards. But sometimes when sleep won't come and the silence presses in, I think about that house. I think about the way her head turned toward me, slow and deliberate like she'd been waiting for me all along. And on nights when the air feels too still, I swear I can hear it again. That faint creaking sound through the vents, back and forth, back and forth.